The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the Manhattan Grand Hotel, casting golden ribbons across Suite 2047's pristine white carpeting. For Corey Burke, this should have been just another routine Monday. A quick check of the interview suite before meeting his 3 o'clock candidate. Perhaps a moment to review her resume one last time. Instead, he found himself standing in the doorway of what he thought was an empty room, his master keycard still clutched in his hand, watching his entire world tilt on its axis. Ellen Johnson had imagined this day 1,000 different ways during the sleepless nights leading up to it. Her first real shot at financial stability, at giving Maya the life she deserved, at proving she could still build something meaningful even as her own body betrayed her. She'd chosen her outfit with meticulous care. A silk robe elegant enough for the hotel's luxury accommodations, professional separates laid out on the bed for the interview, her box braids styled to perfection. But fate, it seemed, had written a different script entirely. The interview wasn't until 3 o'clock, giving Ellen precisely 2 hours to transform herself from exhausted single mother into the polished professional Corey Burke's company needed. She'd arrived early, her interview suit pressed and ready, Maya's cheerful goodbye still warming her heart despite the anxiety gnawing at her stomach. The hotel had been her one splurge, using nearly the last of her savings to stay here overnight, to avoid the stress of rushing from her cramped apartment across town. Now, standing before the full-length mirror in her silk robe, Ellen tried to ignore the prescription bottles lined up on the dresser like tiny sentinels of everything she was hiding. Just 2 more hours. 2 hours to become someone who didn't have stage 4 cancer, who wasn't one missed paycheck from losing her daughter, who wasn't terrified that this interview was her last chance at anything resembling a future. Her hands trembled as she reached for the zipper of her robe. Not from nerves about the interview, though those were certainly there, but from the latest round of medications coursing through her system. The fatigue had been worse lately, the nausea more persistent. She'd taken her pills early this morning, praying they'd give her enough energy to appear healthy and capable for the next few hours. Just long enough to convince Corey Burke she was worth hiring. Suite 2047 was exactly the kind of room Ellen had only seen in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that probably cost more than her monthly rent, a bathroom with marble countertops that gleamed under soft lighting. Maya had been enchanted when they'd checked in last night, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched, her colorful bow bobbing as she declared it was like a princess castle. That bow still sat on the nightstand now, a bright splash of innocence against the adult desperation of Ellen's situation. The mirror reflected a woman who looked almost like her old self, before the diagnosis, before Marcus's cruelty, before survival became her only ambition. Her skin still glowed despite everything. Her box braids still fell in that elegant cascade she'd perfected over years. If you didn't look too closely at the shadows under her eyes or the slight tremor in her hands, you might never know she was dying. Time fractured into crystalline shards when the door opened. Ellen's eyes flew to the mirror's reflection, her silk robe sliding from one shoulder, exposing the delicate curve of her collarbone. A man stood frozen in the doorway, tall, commanding, dressed in a navy suit so perfectly tailored it could only belong to someone who moved in worlds far above hers. Their gazes locked in the glass, and for one impossible heartbeat, neither breathed. She noticed absurdly specific details in that suspended moment. His eyes were the color of steel warmed by winter sunlight. His dark hair showed touches of distinguished silver at the temples, and his expression held something she couldn't name. Not just surprise, but a kind of recognition that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Oh my God!" Ellen's shriek shattered the silence as she spun around, clutching the robe closed with one hand while the other instinctively reached for something, anything, to defend her privacy. Her fingers found a heavy book on the dresser, Maya's bedtime story from last night. "Get out! Who are you? Get out!" The book flew through the air with surprising velocity. He dodged it with practiced ease, but the shock on his face suggested he wasn't accustomed to having literature hurled at his head. But instead of anger, instead of the aggressive masculinity she'd learned to fear from Marcus, something else crossed his features. His mouth quirked, actually quirked, into the ghost of a smile, transforming his sharp businessman's face into something dangerously handsome. "I'm so sorry," he began, his voice a deep baritone that seemed to resonate in her chest. "I had no idea. I thought the suite was empty. I have a master key for all the interview suites and—" "I don't care what keys you have," Ellen interrupted, her voice sharp with panic and something else. Something that felt dangerously like electric awareness. She grabbed a decorative vase from the side table, ready to throw again. "This is my room, and you need to leave right this second before you redecorate with hotel property." He hadn't moved from the doorway, though he did raise his hands in a gesture of surrender. That almost smile had become a full one now, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that would have been charming under absolutely any other circumstances. "Fair enough. Though I should mention that vase is probably worth more than—" The vase sailed past his ear, close enough that she saw him flinch. It shattered against the doorframe in an explosion of crystal and water, the roses that had been inside scattering across the carpet like drops of blood. For a moment, genuine surprise replaced his amusement. "You have excellent aim," he said slowly, and now there was respect in his voice alongside the lingering smile. "Do you often assault hotel guests? Or am I special?" "Hotel guests." Ellen's voice climbed an octave as the pieces began assembling themselves into a horrifying picture. The master key, the casual authority, the suit that probably cost what she made in a month, back when she'd made anything at all. "You're not. Oh God, you're not." Her eyes caught the nameplate she'd noticed on the lobby directory earlier, the one that listed the corporate offices on the hotel's top floors. Burke Enterprises occupied 3 entire levels. Burke,
Cory Burke,
the CEO who was supposed to interview her in— She glanced desperately at the clock. In exactly 97 minutes. The vase she'd just thrown at her potential employer's head. The blood drained from Ellen's face so fast she actually swayed. Her hand flew to her mouth, the robe momentarily forgotten as she reached out to steady herself against the dresser. The movement knocked over one of her prescription bottles, sending it rolling across the mahogany surface in the sudden, terrible silence. "No," she whispered, watching in horror as his gaze tracked the bottle's movement, taking in the child's hair bow beside it, the other medications she tried to hide, the trembling in her hands that had nothing to do with shock and everything to do with illness. "No, no, no. This can't be. I'm supposed to interview with you."
I.M. Ellen Johnson.
The 3 o'clock. And oh God. I just threw a vase at your head. Something shifted in his expression, the amusement fading into something more complex. His eyes, those storm cloud eyes, moved from her face to the medications to the child's bow and back again, and Ellen watched him assembling her story from these scattered pieces of evidence. The single mother, the desperation, the secrets. Ellen Johnson, he repeated, and his voice had gone soft, almost gentle. The candidate with the impeccable resume and the unexplained 6-month gap in employment. She couldn't breathe. This was it. The job was gone. The apartment would follow. Then Maya. Everything she'd been fighting for. Destroyed because she'd thrown hotel property at a CEO's head. "I'm so sorry," she managed, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I didn't know it was you. I thought someone was. I needed somewhere private to change, and the room was supposed to be mine, and I just. Please, I need this job. My daughter needs this job. I can't." Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "Please don't let this ruin. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Corey Burke stood very still, studying her with an intensity that made Ellen's skin prickle. She expected anger, dismissal, perhaps even threats to have her removed from the hotel. What she didn't expect was for him to step fully into the room and gently close the door behind him. "Ms. Johnson," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify, something that sounded almost like wonder. "I'm the one who should apologize. I invaded your privacy, frightened you, and apparently deserved everything you threw at me." That almost smile returned, softer now. "Your interview is in 90 minutes. I suggest you use that time to change into something that doesn't involve potentially weaponizing more hotel decor." He turned toward the door, then paused, his hand on the handle. When he looked back at her, Ellen felt the force of his gaze like a physical thing. Searching, assessing, seeing far more than she wanted to reveal. "And Ms. Johnson?" His voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made her breath catch. "The interview is just a formality. Anyone who throws a crystal vase with that kind of precision while defending her privacy is exactly the kind of person I need on my team. The job is yours if you want it." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Ellen staring at the space where he'd stood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her hands still trembling, but now for entirely different reasons. Through the door, muffled but clear, she heard his voice. "This is Burke. I need someone to clean up Suite 2047 in approximately 2 hours, and charge the damages to my personal account." "Yes, all of them." Ellen sank onto the edge of the bed, her silk robe pooling around her, Maya's cheerful bow catching the afternoon light beside her. In the mirror's reflection, she looked like someone who'd just survived a hurricane, disheveled, shocked, and somehow more alive than she'd felt in months. The CEO who would interview her in 90 minutes had seen her at her most vulnerable, had watched her throw 2 separate objects at his head, had noticed her medications, her daughter's belongings, all the carefully hidden evidence of her desperate circumstances. And he'd smiled at her like she was magnificent. Ellen pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, remembering the way his eyes had held hers in the mirror, that moment of electric recognition before the chaos began. She told herself it was mortification making her heart race. She told herself the heat in her chest was embarrassment, nothing more. But as she rose to finally change for her interview, catching her own reflection one last time, Ellen knew with terrifying certainty that everything had just changed. The man who'd accidentally walked into her room hadn't just seen her half-dressed. He'd seen her, really seen her, and from the look in those storm cloud eyes, Corey Burke hadn't just offered her a job. He'd offered her a beginning she'd never imagined possible, even if neither of them knew it yet. Corey Burke had built an empire on control. Every decision calculated, every emotion managed, every relationship maintained at a comfortable distance. Yet standing outside Suite 2047 with his heart hammering against his ribs like a teenager's, he couldn't remember the last time anything had affected him this way. The image of her burned behind his eyelids. Luminous brown skin catching afternoon light, box braids cascading like silk, and those eyes, God, those eyes that had met his in the mirror with such fierce vulnerability it had stolen his breath. He'd dated models, socialites, women whose beauty was their profession, but none of them had made him forget how to think with a single glance. His phone buzzed. Marcus, his assistant, with the afternoon schedule. Ms. Johnson is confirmed for 3 o'clock. Conference Room B. Her portfolio just arrived. Impressive credentials. Corey stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen.
Ellen Johnson.
The woman who'd thrown a vase at his head with remarkable accuracy. The woman whose trembling hands and hidden medications told a story she clearly didn't want known. The woman whose daughter's cheerful bow sat beside prescriptions that suggested something was terribly wrong. The woman he couldn't stop thinking about. Inside the suite, Ellen forced herself to breathe. Her reflection stared back from the mirror. Professional blazer buttoned to conceal her racing heart. Makeup carefully applied to hide the shadow's exhaustion carved beneath her eyes. She looked capable, employed, healthy. All lies but necessary ones. The interview outfit Maya had helped her choose last week suddenly felt like armor she desperately needed but didn't quite fit. Her phone alarm chimed. Take afternoon meds. She silenced it with shaking fingers, swallowing the pills dry because her hands trembled too much to trust with a water glass. The nausea would pass. It always did. She just needed to hold herself together for 1 hour. One interview. One chance to save everything. The walk to conference room B felt like a death march. Something flickered across his face. Understanding, perhaps, or suspicion. His eyes dropped briefly to her hands, which she tucked under the table to hide their trembling. When he looked up again, his expression had softened into something that made her chest ache. The position is yours, Ms. Johnson. When can you start?
Ellen is carefully maintained composure correct.
Just like that? You're not. After what happened? After you defended yourself against an intruder? His mouth quirked into that dangerous almost smile. That only convinced me you're exactly who I need. Monday too soon. She should have felt relief. Instead, sitting across from Corey Burke with his penetrating gaze and his inexplicable kindness, Ellen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This job was supposed to solve her problems, not create new ones. It certainly wasn't supposed to make her feel this hyper-aware of a man's presence, this dangerously seen. Monday is perfect, she heard herself say, even as warning bells rang in the back of her mind. Professional boundaries. Keep your distance. Don't let him see how desperate you really are. But as Corey extended his hand again to seal their agreement, his fingers lingering a moment too long against hers, Ellen knew with terrifying certainty that boundaries and distance were already casualties of whatever had ignited between them in Suite 2047. Some collisions, she was learning, changed everything. Ellen's first day as Corey's executive assistant began with her hands trembling over his calendar, triple-checking every appointment because she couldn't afford a single mistake. The pay was better than anything she'd had before, enough to cover Maya's preschool and the mounting medical bills. But the proximity to Corey Ashford was its own kind of torture. He was everywhere, in meetings where his sharp intelligence made her pulse quicken, at his desk when she brought coffee, their fingers brushing during the exchange, in the elevator where the confined space filled with his cologne and something else, something electric that made her skin hum with awareness she couldn't afford to feel. "Stop looking at me like that," she wanted to tell him during their second week, when his gaze lingered a beat too long on her face. But acknowledging it would make it real, and Ellen needed this job more than she needed oxygen. The universe had other plans for her carefully maintained boundaries. "Ms. Hayes, there's been an incident at Little Sprouts preschool." The call came during a crucial board meeting. Ellen's blood turned to ice. "Maya." She was apologizing to Corey before she'd fully stood, her words tumbling over themselves, professional composure cracking. "Go," he said simply. "I'll handle the meeting." She found him in the hospital waiting room 2 hours later, having somehow tracked her there. Maya sat in his lap, showing him her bandaged knee with the solemnity of a war veteran, and Corey listened like her scraped knee was the most important thing in the world. Ellen's heart did something dangerous in her chest. "You didn't have to come," she said, even as Maya reached for her. "I know." His eyes held something warm and terrifying. "I wanted to." After that, the walls between them began developing cracks. Late nights working on the Meridian acquisition, their desks pushed together, debating strategy until Ellen forgot she was supposed to be just his assistant. His hand on her back, steadying her during a company event. Conversations about art and childhood and dreams deferred that revealed depths she tried not to see. The office noticed. Whispers followed her through the halls. Speculation about how exactly she'd secured such a coveted position, what she might be doing to keep it. Ellen held her head high and worked twice as hard, determined to prove she'd earned her place. But her body was betraying her. The room tilted without warning during a client presentation. One moment Ellen was distributing materials, the next the floor was rushing up to meet her. Strong arms caught her before impact, and she opened her eyes to find Corey's face above hers, pale with concern. "You're burning up. When's the last time you ate?" "I'm fine," she insisted, trying to pull away. "I just need." "You need a doctor." His voice was iron. "I need you to let me do my job." Their first real fight happened in his office, door closed, voices rising. Him demanding she take care of herself. Her insisting he had no right to interfere. Both of them standing too close, breathing hard, the air between them crackling with more than anger. She won. She always won these battles, even when she was losing the war. The medical file was waiting on the printer the next morning, forgotten in her haste to prove herself indispensable. Corey found it before she did. Ellen knew the moment he read it. She saw his face through the glass of his office, watched understanding dawn like a sunrise, terrible and illuminating. Stage 3. Aggressive treatment recommended. Prognosis uncertain. Their eyes met across the bullpen, and Ellen saw her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. Corey's office door closed with the quiet click of a guillotine blade. Ellen stood with her back against it, the medical file clutched in his hand like evidence at a trial she'd already lost. "How long?" His voice was carefully controlled, which somehow made it worse. "It doesn't matter." "How long?" 2 years since diagnosis. 6 months since they told me. Her throat closed around the words. Since they said there was nothing more they could do. She watched him process it, saw the calculations happening behind those sharp eyes. Stage 4. Terminal. The experimental treatment program at Johns Hopkins that her insurance wouldn't cover. That cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. The quiet resignation in her medical chart that read like a death sentence because that's exactly what it was. The treatment, he said. The one they recommended. I'll pay for it.
No. Ellen.
I said no. Her voice cracked, and damn him, he heard it. I don't need your pity or your charity or whatever this is. I've gotten this far on my own. I'll die with your pride intact? Is that the plan? He moved closer, and she could see the anger now, bright and burning. While Maya grows up without a mother because you were too stubborn to accept help? The slap of her daughter's name against this reality broke something in her. Ellen felt the first sob tear loose from her chest, then another, until she was folding in on herself. 2 years of terror and exhaustion and desperate pretending finally crashing down. She'd kept this from everyone. From Gladys, from the mothers at preschool, from Maya who still believed her mommy was just tired from working so hard. Corey's arms came around her, and she should have pushed him away, should have maintained those boundaries she'd sworn to preserve. Instead, she pressed her face against his chest and shattered. The envelope arrived 3 days later, delivered by a process server who looked at Ellen with professional sympathy that made her stomach drop. Marcus Hayes, petitioning for emergency custody, citing her terminal illness, claiming she was unfit to care for their daughter. Ellen read it twice before her vision whited out with rage and terror. Marcus, who'd hit her while she was pregnant, who'd drained their bank account before disappearing into a bottle, who'd never paid $1 of child support or sent Maya so much as a birthday card. Marcus, who smelled blood in the water and saw his meal ticket slipping away. He would not take her daughter. She would burn the world down first. Let me help. Corey's voice on the phone was steady when hers was shaking. My lawyers. My resources. Whatever you need to fight this. I can't afford. Then you'll pay me back. Set up a payment plan. Whatever makes you feel like this is a loan and not charity. A pause. Please, Ellen. Let me do this. Every instinct screamed to refuse. But this wasn't about her pride anymore. This was about Maya, who deserved better than a father who saw her as leverage and a mother too proud to keep her safe. Strict boundaries, she said finally, her voice hoarse. This is a business arrangement. I'm paying back every penny. Whatever you need. And the office can never know about any of it. The illness, the custody fight, all of it. Agreed. She should have known then that some agreements were made to be broken, that some boundaries, once crossed, could never be restored, that accepting Corey Ashford's help was like opening a door she'd never be able to close again. But Maya's face swam in her vision, and Ellen would have made a deal with the devil himself to keep her daughter safe. This was close enough. The penthouse felt like a museum where Ellen was afraid to touch anything. Maya had no such reservations, racing through rooms larger than their entire apartment, squealing at the floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a glittering toy box far below. Guest wing is through here, Corey said, carrying their pathetic collection of suitcases like they weighed nothing. 2 bedrooms, private bath. Your own space. Propriety. They were still pretending this was proper, this arrangement where she lived in his home and let him pay for treatments that cost more per session than she'd made in a year. Ellen's pride sat in her throat like broken glass. But Maya was spinning in circles in a bedroom bigger than any little girl's dreams, and that made the swallowing easier. Dr. Reeves at Johns Hopkins was brisk and brilliant and didn't promise miracles. The treatment protocol was aggressive, chemotherapy cocktails with names Ellen couldn't pronounce, targeted radiation, clinical trials that might buy her years or might buy her months. She signed consent forms with shaking hands while Corey sat beside her, reading every word like he could protect her from the fine print. He learned fast she'd give him that, how to handle the bags for the infusion pump she wore home, which foods she could stomach and which made her retch, when to push and when to leave her alone in the bathroom, forehead pressed against cool tile, wondering if dying with dignity was even possible. Maya didn't understand why Mommy was tired all the time, why her hair was falling out, why some days Ellen couldn't get out of bed. But she understood that Corey made chocolate chip pancakes on Saturday mornings, helped with her letter tracing, read The Paper Bag Princess with all the voices. "Is Corey going to be my daddy?" Maya asked one night, tucked into sheets that probably cost more than Ellen's car. Ellen's heart cracked clean through. "Sweetie, Corey is... he's helping us right now. But that's different from... I like him better than my real daddy. My real daddy was mean to you." 4 years old and already carrying memories Ellen had tried to shield her from. Ellen pulled Maya close, breathing in her baby shampoo smell, memorizing it against the day when she might not be here to tuck her in. Corey was waiting in the kitchen when Ellen finally emerged, eyes red. He'd learned to read her silences, knew when she needed space and when she needed something to hold on to that wasn't grief. "She asked about you," Ellen said. "If you're going to be her father." Something shifted in his expression. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're helping us. That this is temporary." "Is it?" He moved closer and Ellen's breath caught. Temporary? She should have stepped back. Should have maintained those boundaries they'd agreed on. But his hand came up to cup her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness, and Ellen was so tired of being strong. The kiss was soft and searching, tasting like the future she couldn't let herself want. Ellen kissed him back for one perfect, terrible moment before reality crashed down. She pulled away, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with something between longing and horror. "I can't."
Corey, I am dying.
"I can't let you. Let Maya. You're not dead yet." The words should have been cruel. Instead they sounded like a promise. The custody hearing was a bloodbath. Corey's lawyers eviscerating Marcus's claims with surgical precision. Medical records, character witnesses, financial documentation proving Ellen's stability versus Marcus's DUIs and evictions. The judge awarded Ellen full custody without even a scheduled revisit, and Marcus slunk out looking smaller than Ellen remembered. Corey's hand found hers in the hallway after, squeezed once. She squeezed back, gratitude and terror and something dangerously close to love tangling in her chest until she couldn't tell them apart. She was depending on him. Maya was depending on him. And Ellen was running out of time to figure out what that meant. The treatment turned Ellen into a stranger in her own skin. Hair gone first, then 20 pounds she couldn't afford to lose, then the color in her cheeks until she looked like something carved from chalk. She learned the geography of hospital bathrooms, the particular indignity of vomiting while someone you're falling in love with holds back the scarf covering your bare scalp. Corey never flinched. Not when she retched bile into a basin at 3 in the morning. Not during the 8-hour infusions where he sat beside her reading medical journals, searching for hope in clinical trial data. Not when she screamed at him to leave, to stop witnessing her humiliation, to save himself while he still could. He just stayed. Maya's nightmares started in month 3. Ellen would hear her daughter crying and try to rise, but Corey was already there, scooping Maya up, murmuring reassurances that mommy was sick but getting better, that he was right here, that everything would be okay. Lies maybe, but Maya believed them because Corey said them like truth. He drove her to preschool, attended the parent-teacher conference when Ellen was too weak, made organic lunches with the crusts cut off because Maya liked them that way, became the steady thing in Maya's world while Ellen's body waged war against itself. "I love you." He said it on a Tuesday, no preamble, while Ellen was curled on the couch trying to keep down saltines. "I need you to know that. Before you tell me all the reasons this is a terrible idea, I need you to know." The sob came before she could stop it. "You can't.
Corey, I am dying.
You can't love someone who's too late." His hand found hers, careful of the bruises from the 4. "Already done. It's not fair." Her voice broke. "To you, to Maya, to anyone. I won't let you sign up for this. For watching me. You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to protect me from my own feelings." But she could refuse to encourage them, could keep enough distance that when she died, when not if he'd be able to move on, could save Maya from losing another father figure. She was so busy protecting everyone else, she almost refused the trial. Dr. Reeves laid it out with clinical precision. Experimental immunotherapy, 60% complication rate, 20% mortality from treatment alone. But for those who survived the protocol, remission rates were unprecedented. 3 years, maybe 5. Long enough to see Maya start first grade. Long enough to matter.
No.
Ellen's voice was flat. "I won't risk dying from treatment and leaving her completely alone." "She won't be alone." Corey's interjection was quiet but steel-edged. "If something happens, she has me. But Ellen, if you don't try, if you just give up, that's the guarantee she loses you. The costs. Already handled. Best oncology team in the country on standby. Clinical trial enrollment confirmed pending your consent." He leaned forward, eyes fierce. "You told me you'd fight for Maya. So fight." It wasn't fair using her daughter as leverage. It also wasn't wrong. Ellen signed the consent forms with hands that trembled from more than weakness. The treatment would start in 2 weeks, Dr. Reeves said. She should get her affairs in order just in case. Write letters for Maya. Make arrangements. Plan for the possibility that fighting might be what killed her. That night, Corey found her writing at the kitchen table. A letter that started, "My darling Maya, if you're reading this." He didn't ask what it said. Just pulled up a chair beside her and stayed while she covered page after page with all the things she needed her daughter to know. That she was loved. That she was worthy. That her mother had fought like hell to stay. And maybe, Ellen's pen hesitated over the paper, that Corey Ashford was a good man who would take care of her if the worst happened. She didn't write that last part, but she thought it. And when Corey's hand covered hers, warm and steady and alive, Ellen let herself hope that maybe she wouldn't have to. The experimental treatment hit Ellen's system like a freight train with the brakes cut. Day 3, her fever spiked to 104. Day 4, her organs started shutting down in sequence like dominoes falling. By day 5, the ICU doctor was using words like septic shock and multiple system failure, and asking Corey if Ellen had advanced directives. He refused to leave. Hospital policy be damned, Security would have to drag him out. He sat beside her unconscious form, her hand lost in both of his, and whispered every desperate bargain he could think of into the antiseptic air. Take his money. Take his company. Take anything, just let her stay. Maya asked the question on day 6, staring at her goldfish's empty bowl with the haunting logic of a 4-year-old who'd already learned the world was crueler than picture books suggested. Is Mommy going to die like Goldie? Corey pulled her into his lap. This child who'd somehow become his without papers or legality or any of the proper steps. Your mommy is the strongest person I know. She's fighting really hard to come back to us. But what if she can't fight hard enough? He had no answer that wasn't a lie. So he just held her tighter and prayed to a God he'd never believed in, that Ellen was stubborn enough to prove them all wrong. Somewhere in the fever dreams, Ellen was drowning. Images flickered past like photographs in floodwater. Maya's first steps, her own mother's funeral, the walk-up apartment where she'd been so poor and so afraid and so determined to survive. Corey's face the first time she saw him. Maya laughing. Corey's arms around her. The life she'd been too terrified to want because wanting meant losing. But God, she wanted. Wanted to see Maya grow up. Wanted Sunday mornings and first days of school and all the ordinary miracles she'd been rationing like they were already spent. Wanted Corey's steady presence, his impossible love, the family they'd accidentally built in the spaces between crisis and hope. She wanted to live. Ellen clawed her way back to consciousness on day 7. The first thing she saw was Corey slumped in the bedside chair, exhausted beyond measure. Maya curled against his chest like she belonged there. Both sleeping. Both hers, if she was brave enough to claim them. Her movement must have registered because Corey's eyes snapped open, red-rimmed and wild with hope that was almost painful to witness. "Hey!" she whispered, voice wrecked from the intubation tube they'd removed sometime during the crisis. "Hey yourself." His hand found hers, gentle around the 4 lines. "You scared the hell out of us." "Sorry." Ellen's gaze drifted to Maya, still sleeping, one small hand fisted in Corey's shirt. "How long was I?" 3 days critical. They weren't sure you'd wake up. His voice cracked on the last word. Ellen's eyes burned. She'd put him through this. Put Maya through this. Had almost left them both because she'd been too afraid to admit what they'd become to her. "I love you." The words came easier than breathing. "I'm terrified and I don't know if this treatment will work and I might still die. But I love you. Both of you. And I want." Her throat closed around the enormity of it. "I want to stay." Corey's forehead dropped to their joined hands, his shoulders shaking with something between laughter and sobs. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with tears he didn't bother hiding. "You're stuck with us then. Because I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere." He glanced at Maya, still peacefully unconscious, then back at Ellen. "We're a family now. The messy, complicated, terrifying kind. And I love you. Both of you. Completely." Ellen let the tears come. Let herself feel the full weight of being loved while dying, of being worth fighting for even when the odds were impossible. Outside the ICU window, dawn was breaking over the city. She'd lived to see another sunrise. Felt like a promise. Recovery was a marathon Ellen ran in increments measured by coffee spoons. First sitting up without nausea. Then walking to the bathroom unassisted. Eventually, making it through dinner without needing a nap. The cancer was retreating. Dr. Reeves used words like significant reduction, and promising markers with careful optimism that felt like champagne after months of doom. Life acquired a rhythm that felt dangerously close to normal. Corey left for work while Ellen helped Maya pick out clothes that rarely matched but always delighted. Ellen napped while Maya was at preschool. Corey came home to find them curled on the couch reading library books, and the smile that crossed his face made Ellen's reconstructed heart skip beats her oncologist would disapprove of. Learning to accept help was harder than chemotherapy. Ellen's independence had kept her alive through Marcus's fists and poverty's grinding teeth, and surrendering it felt like dying by degrees. But Corey had a gift for offering support that didn't taste like charity. Asking her opinion on business decisions, letting her reorganize his catastrophic kitchen, respecting her no even when he disagreed with it. "I want to go back to work," she announced one morning, 3 months post-crisis. Part-time, just a few hours a day. She'd braced for argument. Instead, Corey looked up from his laptop and nodded. "What kind of work?" "I thought maybe I could help with the foundation," his charitable organization, the one funding cancer research. "Grant applications, patient advocacy. Use what I've learned for something." That's perfect. No platitudes about taking it easy. No subtle suggestions that she didn't need to work. Just respect for her need to contribute, to matter beyond her illness. "When do you want to start?" Maya's nightmares stopped sometime in month 4. She slept through the night now, secure in a world where Mommy's hair was growing back in soft curls, and Corey read bedtime stories with improvisable voices. She'd started calling him Corey Daddy, a linguistic compromise that made Ellen's throat tight every time. The businessman who'd once worked 80-hour weeks now left promptly at 5. Who'd never wanted children was teaching a 4-year-old to ride a bike in Central Park. Who dated socialites and actresses looked at Ellen, scarred, bald, still 20 pounds too thin, like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Their first real kiss happened on a Tuesday evening. Maya was asleep. Ellen was reading on the couch. Corey sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and when she looked up their eyes caught and held. The kiss was slow and searching, tasting like the future instead of farewell. "Is this real?" Ellen whispered against his mouth. "Or are we just trauma-bonded? Crisis making us think we're something we're not?" Corey pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I fell in love with you before the crisis. Remember? When you were healthy and fierce and wouldn't let me help you. That was months ago. Feels like years." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing the new fuzz of hair growing back. "And I'll love you years from now, when you're healthy and fierce and still won't let me help you with anything." Ellen kissed him again, deeper this time, letting herself believe it, that this wasn't just trauma's aftermath but something built to last, that she could have this love and family and ordinary happiness, even after everything that had tried to destroy her. Later, curled against his chest in the dark, Ellen let herself imagine a future. Maya's first day of kindergarten, holidays, growing old, all the mundane miracles she'd stopped letting herself want. "What are you thinking?" Corey's voice rumbled under her ear. "That I'm terrified this is too good to be true. Then we'll be terrified together." His arms tightened around her. "I'm not going anywhere, Ellen. You're stuck with me." For the first time in years, being stuck sounded exactly like freedom. 9 months after the ICU, Ellen stood in Dr. Reeves's office and heard the word she'd stopped believing in: remission. Complete remission. The scans were clear. Her markers were normal. She was, against all odds and statistics, going to live. She cried in the parking garage for 20 minutes before driving home to tell them. Life acquired the shape of permanence. Ellen took a position directing patient advocacy for the Ashford Foundation, work that mattered and paid her enough to start a college fund for Maya. Maya started kindergarten with Corey walking her to the bus stop each morning, his hand swallowing hers, both of them waving until Ellen disappeared from view. She called him Daddy now without the Corey prefix, like he'd always been hers. But Ellen felt herself building walls even as her body healed. Old habits, maybe. The part of her that had survived Marcus and poverty and cancer by never depending on anyone suddenly couldn't shake the question. Did Corey stay because he loved her, or because he'd invested too much to leave? Was she his partner or his project? He noticed, of course. Corey noticed everything about her. The way she deflected compliments, her hesitation before accepting his touches, the space she maintained between them even as they shared a bed. "I need you to trust me," he said one evening, handing her a key card. "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. The Manhattan Grand Hotel logo embossed in gold. Ellen's stomach dropped. "Corey, what? Trust me." Suite 2047 looked nothing like Ellen remembered. Candles everywhere, casting soft light across surfaces draped in white roses. The same room where she'd walked in on him naked, where her humiliation had been so complete she'd wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Transformed into something that looked like every romantic fantasy she'd stopped letting herself have. Corey stood by the window in a suit that probably cost more than her first car, watching her with an expression that made her heart forget its careful rhythm. "Why here?" Ellen's voice came out smaller than intended. "Of all places, why bring me back here?" "Because this is where it started." He moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Where I first really saw you. Not the professional mask or the brave face you show the world. Just you. Fierce and embarrassed and so determined to maintain your dignity even when everything was falling apart. I walked in on you naked. It was mortifying. It was fate." His hand came up to cup her jaw, the gesture achingly familiar now. "The universe giving me exactly what I didn't know I needed and was too stupid to recognize." Ellen's breath caught.
Corey.
"Let me start over. Properly this time." He stepped back, and she felt the loss of him like cold water.
No crisis. No illness.
No medical emergencies or custody battles or treatment protocols. Just you and me, figuring out if this thing between us is real when there's nothing forcing us together. We live together. We're raising Maya together. How is that starting over? Because I never courted you, never took you on a proper first date, never earned your trust without cancer and fear and desperation muddying everything. His eyes held hers, intense and vulnerable in equal measure. "You're healthy now, Ellen. Strong enough to walk away if this isn't what you want. So I'm asking, let me prove this is real. Let me show you I chose you, not the crisis, not the obligation. You." The walls Ellen had built trembled, hairline cracks spreading through foundations she'd thought unshakable. "What if you realize you only wanted me because I needed saving? What if without that we're just... Then we'll find out together." He pulled a small box from his pocket, but instead of opening it, he set it on the table between them. "I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me take you to dinner, to bring you flowers, To learn what you like besides survival and your daughter's happiness. Ellen stared at the box, at Corey, at the suite that had witnessed her humiliation and was now offering her redemption. She'd spent so long being strong alone that accepting love felt like the greatest vulnerability. But she'd survived worse than being loved. And Corey was looking at her like she hung the moon, cancer scars and all. "Okay," she whispered. "Take me to dinner." His smile could have lit the city. "Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. We live together. I'll knock on the door anyway." 9 months after the ICU, Ellen stood in Dr. Reeves's office and heard the word she'd stopped believing in: remission. Complete remission. The scans were clear. Her markers were normal. She was, against all odds and statistics, going to live. She cried in the parking garage for 20 minutes before driving home to tell them. Life acquired the shape of permanence. Ellen took a position directing patient advocacy for the Ashford Foundation, work that mattered and paid her enough to start a college fund for Maya. Maya started kindergarten with Corey walking her to the bus stop each morning, his hand swallowing hers, both of them waving until Ellen disappeared from view. She called him Daddy now without the Corey prefix, like he'd always been hers. But Ellen felt herself building walls even as her body healed. Old habits, maybe. The part of her that had survived Marcus and poverty and cancer by never depending on anyone suddenly couldn't shake the question. Did Corey stay because he loved her, or because he'd invested too much to leave? Was she his partner or his project? He noticed, of course. Corey noticed everything about her. The way she deflected compliments, her hesitation before accepting his touches, the space she maintained between them even as they shared a bed. "I need you to trust me," he said one evening, handing her a key card. "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. The Manhattan Grand Hotel logo embossed in gold. Ellen's stomach dropped. "Corey, what? Trust me." Suite 2047 looked nothing like Ellen remembered. Candles everywhere, casting soft light across surfaces draped in white roses. The same room where she'd walked in on him naked, where her humiliation had been so complete she'd wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Transformed into something that looked like every romantic fantasy she'd stopped letting herself have. Corey stood by the window in a suit that probably cost more than her first car, watching her with an expression that made her heart forget its careful rhythm. "Why here?" Ellen's voice came out smaller than intended. "Of all places, why bring me back here?" "Because this is where it started." He moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Where I first really saw you. Not the professional mask or the brave face you show the world. Just you. Fierce and embarrassed and so determined to maintain your dignity even when everything was falling apart. I walked in on you naked. It was mortifying. It was fate." His hand came up to cup her jaw, the gesture achingly familiar now. "The universe giving me exactly what I didn't know I needed and was too stupid to recognize." Ellen's breath caught.
Corey.
"Let me start over. Properly this time." He stepped back, and she felt the loss of him like cold water.
No crisis. No illness.
No medical emergencies or custody battles or treatment protocols. Just you and me, figuring out if this thing between us is real when there's nothing forcing us together. We live together. We're raising Maya together. How is that starting over? Because I never courted you, never took you on a proper first date, never earned your trust without cancer and fear and desperation muddying everything. His eyes held hers, intense and vulnerable in equal measure. You're healthy now, Ellen. Strong enough to walk away if this isn't what you want. So I'm asking, let me prove this is real. Let me show you I chose you, not the crisis. Not the obligation. You. The walls Ellen had built trembled. Hairline cracks spreading through foundations she'd thought unshakable. What if you realize you only wanted me because I needed saving? What if without that we're just... Then we'll find out together. He pulled a small box from his pocket, but instead of opening it, he set it on the table between them. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me take you to dinner, to bring you flowers, to learn what you like besides survival and your daughter's happiness. Ellen stared at the box, at Corey, at the suite that had witnessed her humiliation and was now offering her redemption. She'd spent so long being strong alone that accepting love felt like the greatest vulnerability. But she'd survived worse than being loved. And Corey was looking at her like she hung the moon, cancer scars and all. Okay, she whispered. Take me to dinner. His smile could have lit the city. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. We live together. I'll knock on the door anyway. Corey knocked on her bedroom door at precisely 7 o'clock the next evening, flowers in hand like they hadn't shared a bathroom that morning. Ellen answered wearing a dress she'd bought herself. Emerald green, fitted, the kind of thing healthy women wore on dates. He looked at her like she was a miracle, and maybe she was. Dinner became dinners. Movies. A jazz club in the village where Corey's hand found hers across the table and didn't let go. Long walks through Central Park while Maya was at school, talking about everything except illness and survival. Ellen learned he was scared of heights but wouldn't admit it, that he'd wanted to be an architect before business claimed him, that he read poetry at night when he couldn't sleep. He learned she loved thunderstorms and terrible reality TV, that she'd wanted to be a teacher before Maya came early and poverty made dreams negotiable, that she still woke sometimes afraid it was all temporary, that she'd open her eyes to find herself back in that walk-up apartment, dying and alone. I'm here, he'd whisper on those nights, pulling her close. You're here. We're real. They took Maya to the Bronx Zoo, where she insisted on seeing every animal twice, and Corey carried her on his shoulders when her legs gave out. To the Natural History Museum, where Maya declared she would be a paleontologist who studied big dead lizards. To the park on Sunday mornings for pancakes from the vendor Corey had probably never noticed before Ellen. Ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because Ellen was alive to have them. 6 months after that night in Suite 2047, Corey handed her another keycard. Ellen's heart recognized the pattern before her brain caught up. Again. But she was smiling and he knew it. The suite looked different this time. Simpler. Just them and the space where everything had started, come full circle to where it might begin again. Corey took her hands, and Ellen saw his were shaking slightly. This man who commanded boardrooms and brokered million-dollar deals was nervous, asking her a question they both knew the answer to. I had a whole speech planned, he started. Something eloquent about fate and second chances and walking in on the love of my life in the worst possible way. That's pretty good so far. Ellen. His thumbs traced circles on her wrists, over the pulse points that proved she was alive and staying that way. Thank you for fighting, for letting me love you when you thought you had nothing to offer, for giving me a family I never knew I wanted and now can't imagine living without. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the light. a deep green emerald surrounded by diamonds, strong and beautiful and utterly unique. Marry me, not because you need me, but because you choose me. Choose us. Ellen's vision blurred with tears that were joy instead of grief for once. Yes, God, yes. The ring slid on perfect, like it had been waiting for her finger as long as she'd been waiting for this life. Corey stood and kissed her, and Ellen kissed back with everything she had. All the fear and fight and ferocious love she'd been too afraid to give him until now. They told Maya over pancakes the next morning. She took one look at Ellen's ring and screamed loud enough to wake the entire building. I knew it. I knew Daddy would marry Mommy. I'm gonna be a flower girl and wear a princess dress and… Can we get a puppy now? Absolutely not, Ellen and Corey said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed because they were going to be those parents, the united front kind, the forever kind. Maya was already planning the wedding, completely unconcerned with adult concepts like reasonable timelines and budget constraints. Ellen watched Corey listening seriously to their daughter's ideas about rainbow cakes and butterfly decorations, saw the life they'd built from crisis and catastrophe, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Finally, after years of fighting, peace. Hey, Corey said softly, catching her watching. You okay? Ellen smiled. This man who'd seen her at her absolute worst and loved her anyway. This child who'd given her reason to survive. This life she'd clawed back from death's door. Yeah, she said. I really am.